This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. When I was 13 years old, I played baseball. And the reason I bring that up is that I always thought that I would never be able to, but something clicks when you hit that age. 12 to 13, I was never a very good baseball player. Prior to that, I was not naturally gifted at it. But when you hit 12 or 13, like so many other things at that time in life, there's something that arises within you as a child where you begin to kind of see your way just a little bit. Certainly not all the way. I've had middle schoolers in my house. Trust me, they haven't seen their way clear in all things, but there's something that happens at that magical age where your future begins to brighten a little bit. You kind of go from being a child into that teen world, and you start to, on those wobbly legs, get your footing. But you know, for many kids, unfortunately, like the one we're going to speak of today, the future doesn't brighten. It gets darker and darker until there's no light at all. Today, we're going to talk about the homicide of Madeline Soto. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, I'm weary, brother. I'm weary, and I'm tired of covering these cases. It seems like they just will not stop. They are, and I'd like to say that it, and of course, Harmony is a lot younger, but it seems like every time we turn around, there is another one of these cases in the news where children have been failed. And it's like it's a broken record. It's like we can just insert, that little bit of sound into these episodes that we do. The children have been failed. The children have been failed over and over and over and over and over
Joe,
again.
Coming on the heels of Audrey Cunningham, this story made both you and I sick to our stomach because we had just put that horrid story. At least we had a conclusion. We had somebody in jail, and it was I know we're not supposed to do this, Joe, but as a parent, as a father, if something happens to my child under my watch, it's my responsibility. It's our job as parents to protect our children from the monsters and the bad people. And when we introduce the monsters and bad people into their life, then it's on us.
In Madeline's case, she's found out in this horrible abandoned area where she's recovered by law enforcement and the investigators out there after having searched for her for some time.
The story of Madeline Soto began as a 13-year-old girl is missing. And because that's how I end up coming into these stories with Nancy Grace and some of the other stuff that we do, you dig it from the very beginning. She's missing, and here was the drill. She was being taken to school, she's 13, by her mother's longtime boyfriend, not some short-time guy she just met, but a long-time influence in their home, and he took her to school. Now, the first thing we were told is that maybe at that age, Madeline said she was embarrassed of his car and didn't want him to drop her off at school, so he dropped her off a couple of blocks from the school so nobody would see her, so she wouldn't be embarrassed. Now, that story made sense in a very small way, because I've had a 13-year-old daughter that was embarrassed if I breathed. And so I understand that. But as we started following it, there was another thing that came up, and that was on her cell phone. There was a note that she wrote to a friend that when she turned 13, she was going to move out and live in the woods. So police looked at that and said, hey, we got to go check the woods. She might have done it. She just turned 13. But in my mind, when I saw that, Joe, as somebody who reads these stories and follows them up and has to research them, I thought she was saying, there's a monster in my house, in my life, I got to get away from.
Yeah, what's so what would compel a 13-year-old to want to put that to leave the comfort of her home to go live in the woods in Florida with
in around
bugs?
Orlando, where it's
Yeah,
humid and bugs are the
yeah.
size
I
of
mean,
horses.
what's going to make you leave the comfort of your, environmentally controlled air conditioning and soft bed with a pillow
Right.
and food to eat? And also the other thing you have to consider, I think, as an investigator, you start to talk about kids, and I was reflecting back, the changes that kids go through at this age. And this age, for some reason, the 12 and 13-year-old age, you've got this introduction in hormones that are raging throughout the body. And I know that's rote to say that, but it's the truth. And you'll have kids that will just suddenly, for no reason. I know parents in the sound of my voice can identify with this. You'll have a child that will just start raging in front of you, and there's no explanation. It just comes out of nowhere. And there are a lot of kids. You got the old image of the old hobo walking down the road with the stick on his shoulder. He's got his belongings tied up and the handkerchief hanging off of his back. And you're thinking, kids are going to run away, and kids do run away. That's been an issue for years and years, milk cartons and all these sorts of things. But, when you get down to the heart of it as an investigator and you begin to kind of peel these layers back, you think, okay, now, was there some kind of stimulus, if you will, if you look at it, from the perspective of a scientific experiment that was introduced into the equation, that's going to compel this child to leave that environment.
Why
and
would
go
she
down
say
the road.
this? Why would she?
Why would she do that?
I don't think they did that. Okay. You and I both know that they're in an investigation. There's not just a parallel investigation that the police force runs. They're also running game on the media. They give the media the story they need to cover so they get the information out, especially if you're actually looking for a 13-year-old girl. And then the parallel investigation of here's what the evidence looks like. It looks like maybe she met somebody at this church where her mom's boyfriend dropped her off. But the reality is we need to take a really good look at mom's boyfriend because he's probably the most likely story here. So the police are doing two things and telling us a third. So, okay, they have the story that she wrote something about wanting to live in the woods when she turned 13. Well, why 13? If you're going to live in the woods, what's the difference between 12 and 13? That's for starters. But second of all, the story was that she was embarrassed by the car, so he dropped her off to save her the embarrassment. And we, the media, we were told that there was video showing her at this church right there on the main road, and that it appeared she was waiting for somebody. So that led us to believe that maybe she had been talked to online, had communicated with somebody who made arrangements to meet her at this location at this time, and that she had been picked up and she was gone. And that has happened so many times, and we've done plenty of stories on those that don't turn out good. And so there was that story. And then there was the sheriff. The sheriff was very public. He called press conferences. He said, this is what we're doing. This is what we're looking for. This is what we have found. Very direct, very fast. Something you and I have brought up over the last several shows, Joe. The number of video cameras that exist in surveillance. People have them at home now with our doorbell cameras. Many buildings, schools, churches have digital coverage of surveillance cameras because they are inexpensive. So they have access to all of these cameras that can follow movement. And so police having that on top of having cell phones. And by the way, one of the things police caught on to very early on was that Madeline didn't take her cell phone with her to school. Now, if she was going to school that day and her plan was to either meet up with somebody else or to go off on the wood, whatever it was, her communication with the world started and ended with her phone, and she left that at home. So there were a number of things going here that had the police really on target with what they were doing. They were able to track down the boyfriend's cell phone. And while they were, they have to do all sorts of different legal wranglings. They can't just grab your phone. Hey, let me look at your phone. They can't do that. And if you're unwilling, they'll ask you for it. Hey, Dave, look, you're not a suspect or anything. Well, they won't say that. They never say you're not a suspect. They say,
no, they'll never tell you that.
No, they tell this, Dave, look, we really want you to help find your, your daughter, your girlfriend's daughter, whatever.
They'll try to appeal to your humanity.
Yeah, look, you're a man. We know you're not. We know you're not involved. Can I take a look at your phone?
Yeah.
No, you can't take a look at my phone. I don't know what kind of person you are. No, you can't look at my phone. Okay, then we'll get a search warrant. And when they get they're going to get a search warrant for that. And then they're going to find out what's on your phone. And that's what actually tripped up Stephen Stearns. That's where the truth of the investigation came out, because the police put him under arrest. We got stuff on his phone. They didn't give us a lot of very specific stuff, if you remember, Joe. They're very vague, but it was enough for us to believe there was some type of child pornography found on this man's phone that led them to believe he was not just involved, he was the person behind the disappearance of Madeline Soto. And when the police announced, while we're still looking for her, hoping he had stashed her somewhere, that she was hidden, hoping all these horrible things would be true, because all those horrible things were better than the fact that she would be dead. And the police came out 3 days in and said, we believe she's dead. They never do that. Police never do that, Joe. Have you ever seen police come out during a search when we're looking in the woods, we're looking off the road with dogs, we're looking in... I wrote that down on our questionnaire for you. Have you ever seen a sheriff come out and say, we believe we're looking for a body, she's dead?
Yeah, the one thing that investigators can impart to family and friends and those that are vested in the life of a child like Madeline is hope. But as we can tell, it turned out early on that all hope in Madeline's case was lost. You think about, what must it be like when you're looking for a child and you're an investigator and you do have hope at that moment in time, and suddenly there is that instance where something that you're holding in your hand, as small as a smartphone, for instance, opens up a world to arguably some of the most evil that could be perpetrated upon a child. It's no wonder that hope is lost at that moment in time, because suddenly you have a key that unlocks this door. When you begin thinking about what happened to her, I think that police, when they saw all of this data, Dave, you can see how the police at that moment in time began to zero in on Stearns.
At this point, we were 4 days into the investigation of looking for her, 3 days actually, when the Sheriff Mina, said, we do not believe she's alive. It shocked me as somebody who covers these. It shocked me when he said it. But then I thought, he'd already told her mom, he'd already talked to the family and said, and gave them the reason why. Now, we didn't know it at that moment, what the family knew. The family had already been told the evidence they had. And the evidence that they had against Mr. Stephen Stearns, the man who had been living in that home together with as stepdad, even though he was mom's boyfriend, he had been there for a number of years and had been a father figure for Madeline Soto. And what the police told them was, well, first things first, we saw Stephen Stearns on video at about 7:30 in the morning, the day he was supposed to take Madeline to school. We saw him putting her backpack and her school-issued laptop into a dumpster in the back of your apartment complex.
Yeah, that amazes me that people that engage in this kind of activity, as dark as this is, and trust me, this is very dark. It's not so much that what was contained in her backpack was dark, or what was on her. It's probably a Chromebook. I think that a lot of these schools are issuing Chromebooks. It's not that stuff's dark. It's just that they know what else they have. I think what's going to tie them back to the location of a missing child, or in a child that is a homicide victim. They would be so bold as to try to distance themselves from any kind of evidence of her existence, as if she's, vanished off of the face of the earth. That they have to have an awareness, Dave, that CCTV is around, but yet they will go to a place like a dumpster and toss this stuff in. And and the thing about the thing about dumpsters, when we begin to search them, and I've had to climb inside of dumpsters for years and years and dig through, look for items. I've had to look for elements of the body parts, clothing, all kinds of stuff. And someday I'd plan on doing a show on nothing but landfills and searching for bodies in those kinds of locations. But we have a method to do this, and it's painstaking work. But when you have CCTV that gives you an idea of where something might be, it kind of narrows it down for you. Something that might have connection, and the quality of the video has to be really good because they were specifically able to identify this book bag. And then, once they get their hands on it, they can tie it back to her directly.
Right.
And you got this guy that's placing the stuff in here without a care in the world,
Right.
At least seemingly.
And this is a time well before he was supposed to take her to school.
Yeah, and so that again goes back to a postmortem timeline with her. Because
well, let me ask you, because Joe, we live in an area. Joe and I both live in the same area. I don't know if y'all know that, but we do.
Yeah.
Even though we're both from very different parts of the country, and we work on national television and radio broadcast networks, but we live within 15 minutes of each other.
Oh, we never knew it.
It's so funny. But in our area, children tend to go to school. Their elementary and junior high schools take in about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, at the school that Madeline Soto went to, her school day did not begin until 9:30. And so police already had a few things in their back pocket that we were unaware of. I look at it from my standpoint. I was thinking about when my children would go to school. And, well, 8:30 in the morning. Okay, where was he? He was dropping her off near the school at 8:30, according to Stephen Stearns. But police were like, why were you dropping her off there an hour before her school day was going to begin? So police knew certain things they were not putting out to the public, and that's where this came in. 2 hours before he's going to take her to school, he's getting rid of her school-issued laptop and her backpack. The backpack that we do know was described because we had it as part of our descriptors of things she had with her.
Yeah, exactly. Because, listen, the police they're going to exhaust every avenue, if they're invested in this case, and in most cases involving kids that are missing, they're going to pull every bit of footage that they possibly can in order to try to track these kids down. Right. Any child, or even an elderly person that's at risk, they're going to try to do everything that they possibly can to kind of tighten down the focus so that they can begin to understand it. That's why I'm so shocked by the fact that and I'm glad that he didn't take more care.
Right.
But it's like he had very little self-awareness. And I think that you can see that thread running through all of this behavior, very little self-awareness until it gets to this critical moment
and then,
where her life ends.
Joe, the part that got me in all of this, friends, is that according to the affidavit that we've now seen, that's 36 pages long, they actually have Stearns allegedly on video driving the car, and they can see Madeline's body in the vehicle, and she was already dead.
Yeah. So he's, go ahead. I'm sorry.
All I was going to say is that, so here you've got a guy that is on video throwing away her backpack and her laptop, and then he's driving with her dead body in the car.
Yeah.
And they can see it from these surveillance cameras. You said he had no awareness. That points to zero awareness of what was he thinking? Was he in some could he use that as a defense, Joe? You've seen this everywhere, but would he be able to say that he was so out of himself, he was so crazed by whatever had taken him over in that moment, that he wasn't thinking smart enough to even cover that track?
Well, let's don't give them that idea for the defense, because they'll probably snap it up. And here's what I've always thought about these cases that are over the top like this, that I work on, or not work on, but cover in the media. Right. It's almost as if the more grotesque and the more absurd things are, as they reach such a level of horror that is used by the defense many times to attempt to demonstrate that the person is in some way incapacitated mentally, that they're not capable of making good decisions. Whereas I think that maybe years and years ago, they would have said, no, this is this is evidence of evil.
Right.
And so it's not necessarily like that anymore. You've got a man, and again, we have to go back to the timeline, and I'm hoping that we're going to learn more, putting a finer point on the postmortem interval relative to her remains, when that finally does come about. When you're looking at her and you're thinking, well, first off, he's got her riding about in the car with him. The police at least have alluded to the fact that they could tell that she was deceased. Now, what does that mean? That means that she's, obviously, goes without saying, she's not moving. But was she postured in some particular way where it looks like she's unconscious? She might be leaning on the door. She's slumped over. Or was it something else? Did they have such a high elevation of the camera where they could see down into the interior of the vehicle and appreciate some kind of other odd posturing within the vehicle? And I'd like to know, and hopefully this is going to come out as well, is what the status of her clothing was. And I think that plays a very key role here, Dave, because as we know, and as we're about to reveal, what this child endured, what she went through, from the perspective of this individual being in her life, are things that even I, on this show, will not even begin to describe. I hesitate to use the word relief. I think there's an abiding sadness with it, though. If you're on a search team and you're trying to find a child and you're hoping against hope that they might be alive, I don't know that you feel relief when you come across the broken body of a small child. That sort of thing haunts those of us in investigations. It does for years and years. I can still see the faces of children from 40 years ago, Dave. They never leave you at all. And I can promise you that these heroes that were out there doing this search are going to be haunted by what they saw and what was wrought at the hands of this monster.
And that's where maybe, because I don't know. I only know what I'm told. Rarely do I even see pictures unless I have to. It's a choice for me, thankfully, that I don't have to dig in that far. I'm not one of those people that is out there doing that. But my heart breaks every time I do, because my mindset when somebody is missing, which is why I was so shocked that the police came out and said, we know she's dead. We believe she's dead. Because I always think of J.C. Dugard. I think of her in particular being gone, taken right in front of her stepfather, snatched right off the street, and being gone for 18 years and turning back up. And I think about that every time some child goes missing. Well, there's always a chance. There's always a chance.
Yeah.
And then my heart breaks when we got, you find out, okay, now we've got another boyfriend. Usually they have a criminal record, but now we find out that his phone is eat up with horrible things. We know that the minute they gave him a chance to speak, he lawyered up. He said, lawyer, won't you just talk to us? Look, you've got to have some relationship with this girl. You were in her life since she was 8 years old. Please help us. Help us, lawyer. Help us find lawyer. And so when they did find her, Joe, what did police discover when they found the body of Madeline Soto?
Well, we don't really know what they found at this point in time because they're not releasing a lot of information. We do know that she was recovered in a wooded area. And look, and I understand. I think that a lot of us that are familiar with this case and that have been hoping against hope that she would resurface alive. We're hoping to understand, precisely what did happen to her. But, we We don't have that data as of yet. We do not have a cause of death. In Madeline's case, I'm still trying to understand why that has not been released to this point. But can I just tell you what we do have, Dave? Let me just kind of throw a date out to you, okay? A date range, and I want everybody to listen to this. We have date ranges on Stern's phone that begin, you ready? June 19th, 2019, and it ends February 26th, 2024. You know what's contained in that, Dave? Graphic images. Graphic images going back all these years. Now let's do a little arithmetic here. Madeline is 13, right? And so let's do the calculation on that. It's 2024 right now, and let's just say we'll ballpark it and say that Madeline was born in what year? 2000.
Yeah, she had just turned 13 when she went missing.
Yeah, so
2011.
2011, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
So
8 years old.
2019, Dave. This child, this precious angel, since 2019, when she was 8 years old, Dave, all of her teeth have not come in yet. Mark that. Just think about that. She's still experiencing growing pains throughout her body. Mom's having to buy new clothes because she's growing. We know what that's like if you're a parent. Bedtime. Bedtime's supposed to be at 8 or 9. You got to get to bed, honey. It's time to go to bed. The child cannot yet fully take care of themselves. 8 years old. 8 years old. And there are images on this person's phone going back all those years. Now, for us, us old people in the audience, I count myself as old. 2019 doesn't seem that long ago, but when you're living in a hell like this, and trust me, it was, it probably seemed like an eternity for her. Back to your earlier comment, Dave, the comment that she had actually made. I think she would have rather have lived in the woods, in the heat, in the humidity, covered with bugs, than live this existence. And she even had that awareness, going back, all this time. She knew that it was bad, even at her young age, that she knew that there had to be something that was not abnormal like this, that it would be more normal and more secure for her to live away from her home than to indwell this structure with this person because of everything that he had done to her, Dave.
Now, Joe, when you and I look at this, we're coming at from the standpoint of how is it possible that you could have somebody in your world that is living with you, is around you and yours every minute of the day, and you don't know anything's going on? How is that possible? Now, I'm not blaming the mother. I'm questioning the mother. That's all. And I don't think that's a bad thing to do, because this 13-year-old girl is dead, Joe. I didn't do it. You didn't do it. Somebody who knew that girl since before all of her teeth came out, as you mentioned. I have a grandson that's 8, Joe.
Yeah.
And I know the children he's around. I know because of their friends. And it breaks my heart to think that nobody was watching out for her from that age until she's 13, where she's writing, I'd rather be in the woods. I'm not blaming here. I'm just saying, do you have somebody in your life that is around your child that's been around them for years and you don't know this? How do you, before I lose my crap here, this guy had so many pieces of inappropriate child pornography on his cell phone that I have to wonder, Joe Scott Morgan, how is it possible somebody can have that on their phone and you would know? That doesn't, what are they doing in their world that they can have? Are they that crazy? They can have this whole thing going on over here and hide it from you? You don't see it?
Yeah, I don't understand that either. That you could be so numb and lack such self awareness that you don't know that this is going on. And there have been, when it comes to Stephen Stearns, there have been 60 new charges now to this point at the time of this
And
recording.
I got to ask you about these, Joe,
Yeah.
because of the number. Because I don't understand the charges. I mean, I understand them, but I don't know what they actually mean, and I know
Yeah.
you do. So let me start off with one thing, and it goes back to when police saw what they said was Madeline in the car with Stephen
Yeah.
Stearns. I want to get this timeline squared away so you know where she was when they found her. You mentioned that we don't know that much about it. Well, we do know that the morning that they saw Stephen Stearns getting rid of her backpack and her laptop in the dumpster behind their apartment complex, that he came back to the apartment complex and was leaving again around 8:19 that morning. He was that's where they saw Madeline in the car, in the vehicle with Stearns, and they believe she was already dead at that
Yes.
point.
Yeah.
Now, near where her body was found, it was out in this area off of Old Hickory Tree Road in a very rural part of Osceola,
Yeah.
Osceola,
Osceola. Yeah.
Osceola County.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she was found in this area where Stephen Stearns was seen for about an hour and a half changing the tire on a vehicle. So what they're trying to, and she was found in the clothing she was described as wearing that morning. We do know that much. So they saw her, what they believed to be dead, in the back of in the car. I don't know if it was back or front, but in the car with him at 8:19 that morning. And then out in this rural area, he was, based on his cell phone and other information, eyewitness accounts of the car being there for an hour and a half. And she was found near that area where he was allegedly changing the tire on the car. We don't know what don't know everything that he did to her in life. We don't know everything he did to her in death, but that does kind of set the stage for you of what he did to get rid of her body. He wasn't thinking things through when he threw the bag in the dumpster.
No, he wasn't. And I wonder relative to the changing of the tire, if that was planned,
right?
To give.
Was that a staged setup thing?
So that you can kind of alibi yourself relative to that. You're moving about. People see you take a tire out. They might mistake that if you're removing the remains of a 13-year-old child and you're walking them off the road, but yet you come back and you're still feigning changing your tire. I don't know. Maybe his tire was flat, but we do know that her remains were found, close out there. I think one of the sidebars on this whole thing that was unfortunate was that the sheriff had actually sent out on social media an image that was apparently intended to be something that had something to do with the retiree community in his jurisdiction, but unfortunately it was actually an image of Madeline's body at the scene. And I know that there's tremendous regret over that. And again, with phones, you never know, what you're going to be sending out or what folks are going to be exposed to.
The caption below the photo said, "A great day with our seniors," and had a smiley emoji.
Yeah. And, and that's certainly a tragedy. And
but not intentional.
Happened.
And,
no, it's not. I mean, I don't think that that's the case, but unfortunately this child who has just, I mean, look, it is, it's just kind of the exclamation point on all of this. Well, and I think that from the perspective of this child is going to be, when this does go to trial, that jury that's impaneled in this case, they're going to be exposed to all of these horrible images that are there. And, there's 60 charges that have been filed against
What does it mean when, of those 60 charges, there's 8 counts of sexual battery of a child under 12? What does that tell you, Joe?
Well, it tells me that, she's 13, right? I mean,
we
did the calculus on that. That means that proof. This was going, and we go back to that date, that solid date, that benchmark in time that they discovered on him. There's some kind of timestamp in there that goes all the way back to 2019, Dave, that this abuse has been happening, they can document this. And this is key here. They can document this all through this time. And one more thing I think that I'd like to address here that, and I don't want to go too far field into forensic psychology where people, like, my friends like Karen Stark, kind of they're in that world of forensic psychology. But I do know this with sexual predators, and child sexual predators, they have time brackets that they work in, or age brackets. Age brackets is the appropriate term, where when a child ages out, they have no more utility for the abuser. They begin to look for somebody else that fits within that bracket. And this has been demonstrated several times over in cases all over the country over the years. And the tragedy of this, we're saying that she's fully clothed. She's actually in the clothing of the day. If and when they charge him with homicide in Madeline's murder, I'm wondering if there's not necessarily going to be any kind of disruption of her clothing. If he made this decision at this moment in time, allegedly, to take her life, if it was just like, okay, he purposed that morning to end her life and place her body out there, she had just aged out? Or is it going to be where we see some kind of trauma on her where he's beaten her to the point because she threatened, perhaps? She said, I'm not going to live like this. Remember what you said, and I think that this is very important, what you alluded to early on. She said she didn't want to indwell this world anymore. She wanted to live out in the woods. Well, maybe she had expressed that to him at that point in time. And look, he's got everything to lose here.
Right.
Because he's going to go in for, as the old timers, you say, you're going in all day, pal.
Right.
You're going in forever and ever. Amen. You're not going to see the light of day again.
There was another thing on here too, Joe. Okay, we had the 8 counts of sexual battery of a child under 12, but we have 5 counts of sexual battery with a child between 12 and 18. Would that basically incorporate the time because they have video evidence on his phone? Okay.
Yeah, and it's not just photographic, it's video evidence. So you've got, apparently there's evidence of this going on. And I refuse. I'm not going down this road. I'm not going to get so deep into this, particularly given what we know at this point. If people want to read the affidavit, you can find it. It's there. But it implies, and what we're talking about here, and the reason this is important, is that there are breaks in time here. It's not breaks. It's more like these benchmarks in time. Mm-hmm. And that's why this case is so strong, Dave.
Right.
The electronic evidence. And, of course, what we're going to find, I think, probably physically, that she had gone through, there will be evidence of abuse.
Oh, yeah.
This is a young girl. This is a grown man. And there will be evidence of abuse that has gone on forever and ever. And I would imagine that many times with children that have been sexually abused, they will act out in inappropriate manners many times. And when they go back to interview people that were peripheral to her, say in school, like teachers, perhaps, hopefully a counselor, if they took time to spend time with Madeline, maybe she demonstrated something in the classroom or in social situations that seemed odd. And if you have someone that is a forensic psychologist that can go back and look at this and they can say, well, she fits a pattern here. She fits a pattern, and we can kind of identify this, and that would, in fact, be addressed in court. I got to tell you, Stearns is looking at a real uphill battle as they try to move forward with this case. But I do know this. Right now, somewhere out there are other children like Madeline. It's incumbent upon us to be aware of that. This is going on. It goes on every day. And unfortunately, we have a light that has dimmed and it's now been snuffed out. The only thing that we can hope for is that there will be an ultimate price to be paid for these crimes. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, And this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.